Hello. For this week's additional content, I want to talk about something a lot of people you hear in IT, and it's like anything in IT. There's always a lot of buzzwords. One of the big things you start to hear a lot of is this thing called DevOps, and DevOps is the idea. Okay, here, the idea behind this is continual application deployment, development with minimal, lead times and all that, and it's done to basically, I want to put this right, to always ensure you have the most frequent, the latest revisions, all of this stuff. And where this comes into play with VMware and testing and that, DevOps isn't would not be available if you didn't have the ability to build a test environment and rapidly deploy the software to be able to give it to another group to test. Back in the old days when everything was physical, your server could take an hour or two to build. Nowadays with virtualization, your server is deployed in minutes. And this is additionally enhanced with the cloud. And the cloud is basically virtual machines and virtual resources. Those two things, this whole DevOps, combined with whether it's on-site virtualization in VMware or cloud-based with Azure, AWS, whoever, this is all designed to make this continuation, this development, this plan, build, all of this stuff in DevOps to be able to deploy these applications quicker than your neighbor. Get your application out on the road first before somebody else does. There's some fundamental things with this, and speed is great, but so is accuracy. And having worked at companies that develop software, I can tell you if you release stuff too quickly without ideal testing and all that, your update cycle goes once every quarter to, once every week, and you're continually releasing patches. The idea behind the DevOps and getting things out that quick is not a bad idea, but the problem comes in is the whole QA testing and that. And DevOps isn't going to go away. It is going to be something out there because everybody likes quick. Everybody wants to see things get out there, and that whole mix of stuff. But what you end up having is a hit on the quality. And a virtualization platform, a cloud platform, that's all infrastructure. That's deploying things rapidly. That's the stuff that supports code. Okay? So you deploying, 20 Windows servers, that's not going to help you code. Your code is still your code. So when it comes to DevOps and how it works within these virtualization platforms or cloud-based, not really a massive impact from the infrastructure side, except you got to get it built out quickly. But building it doesn't mean the application is better. And one of the things I've seen a lot, and this is odd, you put an application on a Windows version, Windows, let's say 2016, you put it on server hardware, and the application crashes. And it continues to crash and, all that. So you've got three things you can deal with: the hardware platform, the server OS, or the application. People will tend to say, well, it's got to be the server hardware. We'll virtualize it or put it in the cloud. And amazingly, that doesn't fix the problem. Or, well, it's got to be server 2016, so we'll update that. So they'll go into a new virtual platform or cloud, and we'll be on server 2019. It'll run better. And magically, it doesn't. One of the last things people tend to do is say, oh, well, maybe it's the application code. I'm not saying your infrastructure is always going to be perfect. I'm not saying that the server OS is always going to be perfect. But for the most part, they're probably not going to be your problem. If you're writing software internally and you've got a small team or even a medium-sized team doing it, it's going to be your team. It's going to be your issue. Changing, if it's virtualized, cloud-based, not going to fix that problem. Changing it from hardware to virtualization or whatever is not going to fix a code problem. And that is really hard for people to understand. And when it comes to DevOps, what you now have is this continual cycle of change, where yes, you get the feedback and you add in more changes. The downside to this is you might not actually fix the existing problems. And if you don't fix the existing problems, you're basically on a merry-go-round that you can't get off of. And that's a real problem. And this chart, this image, shows all of these vendors. Everybody from Microsoft to smaller companies and that are all, glued into DevOps because people look at the time to market. That's the driver. We got to get to the time to market. Time to market, sounds great, but if your product barely works, what good is it? And I think Windows 8 was a pretty good indication of that for Microsoft years ago. Windows 7 was real solid. Windows 8 came along and man, people hated it. There was all kinds of issues. Fundamentally, from a technical side, it might have been great, but they didn't do enough testing, feedback, all of that stuff. And they ended up continual changing with it, not in the DevOps way, but just change. And eventually was kind of basically thrown to the side in favor of Windows 10. So just realize that DevOps, you're going to hear that term. People, gotta have it now, all that junk. And yet, well, you get what you pay for. And sometimes what you end up with is a continual update stream. And that can really, especially if you have some bad issues in there, that can really undermine the confidence of your customers. So the whole DevOps thing, just be a little cautious with it. There's definitely a lot to unpack there, and it's definitely not as clear as what anyone would make you believe. So just some additional content for the week. Thank you much.